Hello, everyone. So my name is Jessica Locher. I'm the Executive Director of ECHO and the Chair of the Homeless Intervention Task Force, which is a coalition of the Wisconsin Balanced Estate Continuum of Care. So thank you so much for coming to our presentation on the state of homelessness here in our coalition. And so I will turn it over to Carrie Poser.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. Good morning, everyone. How are we doing? Okay, we'll work with that. My name is Carrie Poser. I am the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Balanced Estate Continuum of Care. If you have no idea what that means, it's okay. We're going to talk about that. There's about 4 slides that have to do with what we are and what we do. Just for a show of hands, how many people in the room have participated in a local coalition meeting prior to this gathering? How many people have gone to one of those meetings? Okay, a good chunk of people. Excellent. Well, I'm excited to share some information with you all. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to refer to, I should say this, Jessica referred to it as HITF. I'm going to refer to it as the Rock Wall Homeless Coalition. I mean the same thing. You have an actual name for your group, but from the Balanced Estate perspective, we just call it the Rock Wall Coalition. So when you see that all over the documents, that's what we mean. And then this is kind of our agenda for the day, or morning, not the whole day. The handouts are kind of earmarked for the different sections. So we're going to start off talking about COC purpose and structure. We're going to talk a little bit about the homeless service system and what that means, how that impacts maybe funding choices based on the need that you have in the community, and that can fluctuate from community to community. And then we're going to wrap up talking a little bit about coordinated entry and access. We're going to talk about what are we supposed to do with all this information, look at ways of system improvement, and then finish up with advocacy. I am really good with questions happening kind of throughout the conversation. I think it's helpful for you to ask the questions when you have them, or at least in the section in which you have them. It also gives me a chance to drink my coffee. So if you are all good with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into part 1, which is structure and purpose. That's your handout number 1. It is a pretty detailed history lesson of the balance of state. So it talks about the space we cover, it talks about how we started, and it talks about the journey that we've had. I've been the director for 10 years. We started with just a volunteer board of directors and no staff. I was hired about 10 years ago as the sole staff, and then slowly but surely we have added to a total of 10. It also has information in there about like who gets money through the balance of state, and so there's a chart, and we'll see the names of agencies and then different grants. It also talks about some state funding that we receive, some committees that we have available if you want to participate, and it has the contact information for myself and all my staff. So what is a COC? What's the balance of state? What does that mean? 2 things. Number 1, it's a nonprofit organization. So similar to many of you in the room, in which you probably work for a nonprofit organization, that you either work for a nonprofit, you're familiar with a nonprofit, but the way that it's structured, there's generally a volunteer board, there's some staff, there's a mission, and you're supposed to do some stuff, right? So that's the Balanced Estate Continuum of Care is that. It also serves a secondary role, which is to be the HUD-recognized continuum of care for the purposes of federal funding. There's about 400 plus COCs, or continuums of care, in the country. The Balanced Estate is one of them. In Wisconsin, we have 4, so we have Dane, Milwaukee, Racine, and then everything else. And everything else falls under the Wisconsin Balanced Estate Continuum of Care, so all 69 of those counties. The mission of the Balance of State, because nonprofits all have mission statements, right? So the mission statement for the Balance of State currently is that we seek to, and I shouldn't have to look, seek to end homelessness by supporting local coalitions. The purpose of our organization is to end homelessness. And by doing that, working with local coalitions and strengthening the work you're doing, we hope to achieve that. Rock Wall Local Homeless Coalition is a member of the Balance of State. So what does that mean? Well, we're a membership organization, so we're made up of 21 members. And those 21 members are not people and they are not agencies, but they are coalitions. So your coalition represents one of the voting members within the 21-member Balance of State. In addition to that, there's a slide that we'll talk about a little bit that says, these are the things that you all have to do, that we ask of you to have in order to operate kind of a local homeless coalition. But before we get to that, I think it's also important that we talk about what ending homelessness means. Because I've said it now probably 4 times. It's all over the posters on the way here. Thank you for that, by the way, map to get here. But it says it everywhere. So what does ending homelessness mean? My guess is if we ask the people in this room what your definition of ending homelessness means, there's probably going to be differences around what that means. So I want to make sure that we say it out loud, that we say what our perspective is, and that's on the slide. It's that bottom part. Ending homelessness does not necessarily mean that there will not be a single person that sleeps outside, although that would be ideal. It does not mean that there'll not be a single person that has to flee violence, although that would be ideal. What it means is we have strategies and a system in place so that if we can't stop it from happening, if we can't prevent that homelessness situation from happening, at least what we can do is make sure that it's rare, it's brief, and it's non-reoccurring. That's the goal of ending homelessness from the Balance of State perspective. Again, other groups may have other definitions for that, but that's ours. So this slide kind of walks you through, it's the simplified Cliff Note version of what you have in the handout. So on the left side, the Balance of State in some capacity started meeting in 1992. It was not an official thing. It wasn't an organization at that point. It was an arm of or a group coming out of the Division of Housing at the state level. And at that point, there was a lady that worked there, and she gathered up a lot of people and said, let's write this competitive application for funding. And we're gonna pull together all the counties, and we're gonna have agencies within several spaces. It didn't cover everybody, write for some grants. In 2009, we broke from the state. The membership voted to separate from the state and become our own thing. So in 2011, we did all the nonprofit stuff where you file bylaws and articles of incorporation, and we became our own nonprofit. In 2019, we kind of revitalized that. We did some restated bylaws. We shook things up a little bit. We changed some of the structure and the process. Finalizing decisions like, am I a coordinator of services? Am I the executive director? Do we have regions of board membership, or do we have direct board elections? Things like that. But the gist is we've been in existence now officially since 2011, and our purpose continues to be the same, which is to support the local coalitions that make up the Balance of State so we can end homelessness together. There is a volunteer board of directors. They meet every month. In addition to that, the organization as a whole used to meet in person. So before COVID, we would host meetings. It's like a 2-day meeting, and we'd try and kind of scatter it around different spaces within the Balance of State. We do that 4 times a year. When COVID happened, we paused that. We switched to a virtual meeting format. And then a few years ago, we started and launched a conference. So we held our first conference in Green Bay. We did the second one, which was an improvement on the first. I think we made some good shifts and changes in bringing some additional partners to the table. Next year, we'll be in Appleton. We're very excited about bringing people together and being able to build on what we have kind of established there. I mentioned that the Balance of State has 21 members and you're a member, right? The Rock Wall Coalition is a member. we ask of that coalition to have some things. So number one, we ask you to have a board member. We ask you to elect a board member to serve on the nonprofit board of directors. That person is Jessica Loker. She was elected by your coalition. She has served on the board for a good long time. She has been an advocate for this community for a long time. Number two, you have a point in time lead. Jessica, is that still you too? All right. Jessica's your point in time lead too. That's the person that's supposed to coordinate all the paperwork and all the stuff and then and the data, and she sends that up, and then my staff take a look at it, and then we send it back. It's a fun relationship. But you have somebody designated to kind of operate that point in time count twice a year in your community. The third thing that you have is an SSO position. So a coordinated entry lead is decided, and then that agency hires a human, and they get some funding from us. So do we have folks from CAI in the room? All right, you're our rep over there. So CAI has that grant, and so they are your coordinated entry lead for this community. We also ask that the coalition has some kind of governing document, something that says what you are, how do you become a member, what rules or responsibilities do you have, and that kind of process. And we ask that for all the coalitions, so not just Rockwall, but all of them. I mentioned that our staff has grown, so it's myself, and then I have two managers, a grants manager and then a homeless systems manager. The grants manager is Meredith McCoy. She's been around for the Balance of State for a while. She oversees grants that we have that we give money out to, and in terms of monitoring and compliance of other HUD money. So her and her team are responsible for that. On the other side, we have the homeless systems team. Ryan is back there. He is the manager of that team, and we have a variety of staff focusing on different components. So we have somebody that's focused on YHDP, or the youth demonstration grant, along with family homelessness. We have a group that is dedicated to enhancement and coordination of the coordinated entry system. And then we have Liz. Where's Liz? Liz is my newest. Task is we're developing her tasks, but coordination and relationship development with the coalitions is a big one for her. So that's what their team is designed to do. And then the last kind of column is about funding. So we do have a bunch of funding that comes through the Balance of State. Coordinated entry is one of them, but the other biggest one is the $7 million DV Rapid Rehousing Grant that we receive, and we sub that out to domestic violence providers across the state. Do we have anybody from Family Services in the room? I don't know if we do or not, but Family Services is the agency that we subcontract with for that grant here in this community. Let's see, what do we got next? Oh, there's a map. So the map, I put it up on the screen because sometimes I think perspective is good. So we have 21 coalitions. That's a lot of space to cover, and the different colors represent the different coalitions. So you can see yours way down at the bottom. It's the 2 counties that make up your coalition. But if you look north, you start to see coalitions that are 5, 6, 7 counties wide. We do have some that are just 1, like Kenosha, Jefferson, Waukesha, Ozaki, Brown, Green Bay. But we cover all of that except for Dane. Milwaukee is the little purple, and Racine is that gray, light gray there. Homeless coalitions. All right, before I go to this, also because I want to drink my coffee, do we have questions at this point before I jump to this slide? Anything about all the words I just said? Okay. Jessica alluded to this slide when she was up here. In order to make a local homeless coalition truly the entity that we wish it to be, we need diverse perspective. We need lots of different kinds of people with lots of different experience coming to the table. So the ones in purple, if you can see purple, are nonprofit homeless providers, victim service providers, and emergency shelters. Those are the ones you typically think of as being involved in homeless services. But all the other people on this, or agencies or organizations on this slide, also we want them to be involved. So you can see it's everything from managed care organizations to food pantries to hospitals to law enforcement, foundations, people with lived experience, and honestly, anybody that has a passion for doing this work. So when we are trying to pass policies or make system improvements, having this core group, for example, from the Rock Wall area, that really represents this whole kind of spectrum of service is helpful, because we are able to tap in to so many different ideas and ways in which we can make things better, right? Homeless service providers have a very specific outlook and process that they're involved in. They've got to worry about HUD definitions and HUD rules and lots of other things. Things that maybe economic support staff have no idea about. But they have a different perspective because of what they see every day or what they're involved with every day. So bringing those folks and everyone to the table to have some honestly rich dialogue and conversation around the best ways to end homelessness in a community is the gold standard. Now, not any one of the 21 coalitions have all of this mastered. So just to be clear, nobody has figured out how to include all the people and has some amazing, perfect system. I'm not suggesting that. But this is an area of ongoing improvement that we hope to see for all the coalitions. Any questions about that? About who? Okay, cool. Okay, we made it through handout 1. So now we're going to switch to handout number 2. Handout number 2 is going to break down into the components of the homeless crisis response system. So there are 8 parts. I am not going to talk through all 8, so rest assured. So handout 2, the whole idea of this is to talk about, we talked about the structure of the system, right? So now we need to talk about actually helping humans that are experiencing homelessness. How do we do that? So there are 8 different components to what is called or referred to as the homeless crisis response system. So that is everything from diversion, outreach, prevention, intake assessment, supportive services, housing, all of it. Those each play a role in the system. And the reason it's important to recognize that there is an actual flowing system within your community is because when we talk about it as a system, all the parts together, right, we are able to better center around that common goal of rare, brief, and non-reoccurring, because we understand that the role that each of those entities might play is all for the greater good or the common goal, right? So a shelter has a role and a purpose. The outreach worker has a role and a purpose. The person doing the case management for somebody in housing has a role and a purpose. But it's all designed to work together kind of for that same greater good. So what I did was I took kind of the basics in those components and I broke them into 2 parts. One is called front door services and one is called housing programs. Your front door services are what you think of when somebody enters the homeless service system, or they're going to make contact with the homeless service system, kind of that front door into that system. So this would be things like homeless prevention, outreach, and emergency shelters. So for Rockwall, and this might not be perfect, this is my best assessment based on the information I got from Jessica and what I know, to try and put the agencies that operate within these 2 counties into these kind of buckets. So for homeless prevention, we have Center for Veteran Issues. They're based in Milwaukee, but they provide supportive housing, rapid rehousing services for veterans and their families. Their territory includes Rockwall. ECHO, Edgerton Community Outreach, Family Promise of Greater Beloit, Foundations for Rural Housing, which is actually based in Madison, and they're a statewide organization. They're supposed to provide assistance across the state. Rock County, I'm assuming that's Rock County Human Services, and I just didn't put the Human Services part there. Sorry about that. Salvation Army, and then Vivent Health. From an outreach perspective, we have Beloit Cares, ECHO, and then the state VORP program. I don't know how active they are right now, but the state VORP program was designed to be outreach for veterans. And then last but not least, you have a whole bunch of this, emergency services. So this is your crisis response, someplace for somebody to stay. You have a lot of options on the table. You have, and I say that in comparison to the other 21, or the other 20 coalitions. So Community Action, Rock Wall, ECHO, Edgerton, Family Promise, Family Services, Gifts, House of Mercy, New Beginnings, Rock County Human Services, Spirit of Hope, Salvation Army, and the Y. Those are a lot of points of entry into the system. We'll come back to why that's important. Housing programs. So once we pass through the front door, some folks that are going to enter the homeless service system are going to self-resolve. They're going to figure out how to be self-sufficient outside of any additional assistance from anyone. But some people are going to need more supportive housing. They're going to need some additional assistance in order to make that happen. So we have some different types of those programs in Rockwall. So rapid rehousing, which is a housing intervention in which the client signs the lease and the agency promises to provide case management and will help with some of the rent, but the lease actually belongs to the client. In this community, you have Rockwall, ECHO, and Family Services that have those types of programs. They're not all equal, right? They don't all get the same amount of money. They don't all serve the same population, but it's the same project type. Permanent supportive housing. So this particular intervention is designed for folks that need time. Rapid rehousing is a 2-year limit, right? So that's the max. So day one, you got to start talking about the end, right? Like, what is the end goal to be self-sufficient, because this project can only last for 2 years. For permanent supportive housing, it's different. There isn't that kind of ticking clock. It is an open-ended time period in which they can provide more intensive case management. And one of the other components of permanent supportive housing is that the agency is actually the one on the lease. It gives a little bit more, I'm going to say, sometimes it makes landlords feel a little bit better to have the agency on the lease. That way, if something goes wrong or something doesn't work out, the landlord isn't out the money. Permanent supportive housing is designed for those with the most substantial barriers. Generally speaking, they're going to have more mental health issues, they're going to have more substance use issues, they're going to have more challenges, which needs more time. In this community, you have 2 agencies that provide that service. One is Community Action Rockwall, and the other one is Walworth County Housing Authority. Again, same project type, but different. Community Action has a scattered site model where they use apartments that exist in the community. Walworth County has a site-based program, which is a set building. Other project models, right? So this could be transitional housing. This could be other permanent housing. So what do I mean by other? Other permanent housing programs that maybe don't have the same requirements for entry that something like permanent supportive housing would have. So to get into permanent supportive housing, you have to be chronically homeless, which means homeless a really long time, and you have to have a diagnosed disability. So if the project is permanent housing but doesn't require the disability to get in, they'll fall under what's called other permanent housing. So just so you know. And you have a variety of those too. So Bethel House, ECHO, Edgerton, Project 1649, Neighborhood Housing Services, Red Road House, Rock Valley Community Programs, Salvation Army, and Vivan Health. And so from these 2 slides, what I would say from an outside person looking at this is you definitely have a lot of options. You definitely have a lot of resources available to the folks in your community. I'm not saying it's enough. I'm not saying that therefore there's no issue. I'm just saying you have a lot of folks doing a lot of work in these 2 communities for the people that are experiencing homelessness. I'm going to talk about Vivint for just a second. They're a statewide organization that not many people are familiar with. They have an office in Beloit. They provide services and specifically can do housing statewide for folks that are living with HIV or AIDS. And this is just a chart that shows you kind of that information. They have a second side to their organization, which is harm reduction. Some people would know that from they do safe needle exchange, they can do Narcan training, that kind of stuff. They can do testing, those kinds of things. So before I jump to the homeless definition, I am going to talk about homeless prevention for a minute. So it's one of the components of the homeless crisis response system. And again, I'm not going to go through all of the components, but the reason this handout exists is because oftentimes we're not talking about the same thing. When I say homeless prevention, you might not be thinking about the same kind of homeless prevention that I'm thinking of. If I'm talking about supportive housing, you might not be thinking about the same thing I am. So in this document, not only am I defining it for you, and I'm giving you examples of it, but then I'm even giving you questions to have, if you want, community-level conversations about what that program looks like in your community. So for example, we're going to walk through homeless prevention for a minute because you have a bunch of homeless prevention. So you do have homeless prevention programs here. So the question is, are they homeless prevention or are they eviction prevention programs? I'm not actually asking you to tell me that right now, but I am saying that your community should know the difference. Your community should know which one is which. Homeless prevention is targeted assistance for folks that are on their last couch. There are no more options. This is it. They will lose this housing, whatever that might be, and there is no going back without intervention. So that could be they're in a rental unit. That's real. They could be in a rental unit. They could be staying with a friend, right? That's kicking them out and saying, you can't stay here anymore. They've bounced around and they're at their last possible option. Also can be for folks that are exiting an institution, so they were in jail, and maybe they weren't homeless going into jail, but they're certainly going to be homeless coming out of jail. Homeless prevention, the success of homeless prevention means the person didn't become homeless. That's what it means. That's how we know it worked. Eviction prevention, which is also a very valid intervention, but its design and its purpose is to stop a court eviction from occurring. It is to intercede in the court eviction to either pay the arrears or do whatever it is that the landlord is upset about, or make a deal so that the eviction doesn't go on the record, right? Everybody shakes hands, the client moves out, there's no eviction, it gets dropped, and everybody moves on. Eviction prevention, the success of it is that there isn't an eviction. That's how you know that it worked. Not everyone that gets evicted shows up homeless. And that's the difference. Because everybody for homeless prevention, if they lose their housing, that's the point. They will be homeless. Does that make sense to folks? So the part that's important is to know the difference of all the programs that exist up there, which ones are doing eviction prevention and which ones are doing homeless prevention. And so the questions you can see are things like that. Does the community have both kinds? How much of each kind is needed? What does it look like in your community? I don't have the statistics or the data that says how frequently evictions are occurring in Rock or in each individual city. But if eviction prevention is a thing that is a need within your community, then certainly having those kinds of projects is important, and having them in the right places is important. How much homeless prevention do you need? How many people are entering your system, the homeless system, because they got kicked out from their sister, they lost their apartment, they were in jail and got discharged without a plan, or they were in a motel they couldn't pay for anymore? How many people are entering from that kind of scenario? And what is the level of intervention that could have stopped that from happening? That's kind of the beauty of homeless prevention is it's the one time you get to stop the bad thing from happening, right? I mean, once you are into this stuff, the bad thing has already happened. They've already experienced the trauma that is homeless. They've either slept in their car or slept in a storage unit or slept in a shelter. That's already happened. And now these programs are designed to help them rebuild their life. But the goal of prevention is to stop it from happening in the first place. So I encourage you, if that is a conversational topic that is of interest, any one of these components within the homeless service system has those kinds of questions. How much do you need? What's the success look like? How do you know? Who's doing what? It's an important conversation to have to strengthen the kind of collective understanding of your homeless, your coalition. Like, that's how you make sure everybody is on the same page, right? They have some idea about what is happening within the coalition, but also who's doing what and of what part, of what role do they play? Do we have questions? Anybody have questions around that? Does it make you think of other things that you have questions about?
My name is Brittany. I'm with YWCA Rock County. And maybe you'll have more data on this when you talk about data, but obviously we do the point in time count. And you had mentioned that as compared to other coalitions, we have a lot of services. Is there like a sweet spot number of services compared to point in time count? Are we getting close? Are we not? Or is that something you'll talk about more in data?
I promise we're going to talk about that after the break. But yes, we're going to talk about what your data says to the outside world and where you can start looking at where the gaps might be within the system in terms of structure, or maybe you have a lot of shelter, but maybe that shelter isn't designed necessarily for some of the folks that are seeking it. So that kind of conversation. And those, to be honest, are really hard conversations to have in a community, because my guess is some of these projects have been operating, and these agencies have been operating the way they've been operating for a long time. I mean, I've been doing this for 10 years, and many of these, I remember the people that worked at these organizations, or they're the same people that are still working and dedicated to working in those organizations. So it's a hard conversation to start to have to change the way you're doing things based on the humans that you're trying to help, because they are changing, right? It's not the same people that are outside or the same people that are struggling today that there were, I hope not, 10 years ago. But thank you. Any other questions?
Under other, when we were talking about that, you have other permanent housing. Would that include, for example, if someone has an intellectual developmental disability, moving into a CRA or a group home?
Only if the program type is dedicated to homelessness. So that's the difference, right? If that project or that program type can include people that were formerly homeless, but it's not specific for folks that are homeless. Does that make sense? No problem. Other questions?
Hi, this is wonderful information. When we talk about different people and it's not somebody from 10 years ago, we really hope so, right? But
I hope so.
Yeah, hope so. But the new face of homelessness is dual income housing, or dual income families, sorry. And their rent gets raised, of course, and then there's no affordability. Do they fit into these services as they exist?
So it depends. I hear what you're saying, and so you just want to race right ahead. So there's a whole section. When we talk about data, it's the last chunk, which we talk about the affordability problem that exists. And I could say it exists in Rockwall, it exists in the state of Wisconsin, it exists in the country, and that we are creating an environment in which people can't afford rent, right? They just can't afford to pay for these things. When you're talking about the change in homelessness, not only the dual income, two people households are changing, more male-led families, more single youth, there's just more of some different types where are not necessarily who we thought of before. And that is exactly the kind of change in conversation Are the projects designed for that group? I did not put on the, I didn't put on the slide, but I know that in each of these emergency, I'm pointing to the wrong thing. Each of the emergency shelters serve a particular population. Like there is a particular purpose for each of these. And that is exactly the kind of conversation that should happen is how many beds do we have for singles? How many beds do we have for youth? How many beds do we have for the 2-parent households? What options do we have for them? I've seen in other communities where they have the option. So I'm going to give you an example. There's a community. It has a shelter structure and system for single people. If they're a couple, they can both come in, but it's separate wings for male and female. If you work, if you have a job, that's fine. Like they make accommodations for that so that you can go to your work, you can go to your job, even if it's a 3rd shift, and you can sleep during the day. In the same community, they have another program that is also for single people that does not accommodate such situation. So if you work 3rd shift, there's no option. You're working your 3rd shift and then you're homeless during the day. There's no place for you to go during the day to sleep, because there's places during the day you can go, but you have to be awake. Libraries don't want you to fall asleep in the back corner. They don't want you sleeping outside. So where do they go? What's the plan? And it's making sure that your services are designed not just for the one person that it might fit, but like this growing need within the community. Is that okay? And I have scary stories of communities that didn't do that, and they lost funding and lost projects. And so I highly encourage folks to be staying on top of the trends that they're seeing, which is why coalition conversations are so important, because not one agency is seeing the whole picture. That's why you bring everybody together, because they're seeing different parts, for sure. So homeless diversion, it's interesting that we talk about it like it's a separate thing. We heard it yesterday a couple of times. We were in Ozaki yesterday. And I've heard it a few times in other conversations recently. When I talk about what diversion is, they say things like, well, we do that. We're already doing that. I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know that was a program. And it is. And actually, to do it really well, you do need to have some qualified and some strong case managers to help walk through it. So the best description I've ever had about what diversion is had to do with this moment of crisis, right? Something bad has happened. You're driving down the highway and you blow a flat tire and you pull over and you're in panic, right? I don't know anybody that wouldn't be in panic. You're driving 65 miles an hour and suddenly your tire blows, right? It's panic. We have a minute to make a decision. What are we gonna do next? Some folks have the ability to respond awesome in moments of crisis. They know exactly what to do, they're calm, all the things. Other people, absolutely not, right? That is their worst moment is moments of crisis. They don't do very well. So now imagine that you are without a place to live. Go. What are you gonna do? Do you have a friend? Do you have a sister? Do you have a cousin? Do you have anybody you can call? Do you have anybody that can help problem solve or walk through, or knowing you, if you're panicking, to help calm you down? Some people have amazing support systems and have that person, right? I say, talk me off the ledge, right? I've said that. It's a terrible phrase, but it's true. Like, walk me back from being absolutely spinning out. But not everybody has that. So in those moments of crisis, if you have a qualified case manager that's highly trained and skilled to be able to sit down with someone and give them a minute, let them help walk through what that solution might be. Maybe it is helping to call their sister. Maybe it is helping to call their mom. Maybe shelter is the option. Maybe that is the only other option other than sleeping in their car. But who is walking through that with them in that moment with the understanding and the calm and the grace to say, it's okay to panic. Now let me help you walk through what the next step is. That's diversion. That's the art of diversion. Can we stop somebody from having to experience homelessness by helping them walk through it? And if there are some things that we can do to make the situation better, like Johnny got kicked out because he's eating all of his sister's food, and sister's real mad because he's eating all of his food, and there could be a conversation about helping with the food bill, and maybe there's a gift card or something we can do to help supplement sister's income in order to help Johnny stay there. Awesome. Johnny doesn't have to leave. That's a simple example, but things like that where we can think through ways to support them not having to enter the homeless service system. That's diversion. And most communities do not have a dedicated program of doing that, to stop the entry into homelessness in that way. The Balance of State got some money from the Bezos grant a few years ago, and we did an open RFP for communities or agencies that would be interested in doing kind of a pilot around family homelessness. We selected Family Promise of Waukesha County, and so we've been working with them. We're on year 2. And what the hope is, after 5 years, is that we will have some kind of handbook on this is the kind of structure of a program, the qualifications, the skills, the amount of money you need to really truly make that kind of a programmatic change. But that doesn't mean you have to wait 3 more years to figure out how to do it. Diversion is an art, and if you have the right people doing it, I believe it will make a significant difference, especially in times, I will say, especially in times where your shelters are busting at the seams. If you just have more and more folks that are trying to enter shelter and you don't have the space, taking a minute to develop some kind of diversion program or training or partnership is an important step. So it walks through what it is, questions to ask about it. Anybody have any questions? Did you hear that, Ryan? Do you want to repeat
Kind of
it?
training?
Yeah, so-
And where do you go for the training for diversion?
Yes, that's the question. Do you want to answer that, or do you want me to? Okay. So I can certainly send out, there are a couple of different organizations, national organizations, that have some training materials around diversion and what the next steps are. And then there's an organization in Cleveland, I'm looking up because I'm pretty sure it's Cleveland, that has that structure, and I believe they have it online too. So we can certainly send out the resources to get started. You could also talk with Family Promise of Waukesha. I'm pretty sure they're willing, I'm looking at Ryan, I'm pretty sure they're willing to talk about how they've structured their program.
Yeah, I would connect with either myself or Erica Olson. We can start with what you have available, right? I mean, you can do diversion without any financial supports, right? Oftentimes somebody just needs 10 minutes with your best case manager and it can make a huge impact. And then what happens if you start to add a little bit of financial support to that? What kind of impact can you add to that? So it's really about what do you have available, and then we can build off of that based off of what, we can have some strengths-based conversations and build from there. So reach out to us, we can support you, but we can also get trainings from national organizations and stuff as well.
Absolutely, and I'm gonna look to my Liz and Sarah. Is somebody taking notes? Awesome, okay. Will you take notes about diversion training? Okay, thank you.
Add another one. So with YWCA, with our shelter, our case managers, nobody wants to be in shelter if they don't have to, especially if they're a victim of domestic violence. So working with that individual to work on, for instance, a restraining order to keep them in their home, is that considered diversion? Making sure that they don't go homeless because of the circumstance they're in.
I would argue it is in that situation because what you're doing is protecting and saving that housing unit for that person, because the restraining order would remove the other person. What we often see for homeless services, and by definition, is that that person has fled that situation, therefore losing their housing. So yes, I would argue that that is a way, especially for survivors, that diversion can play a critical role. And it doesn't just have to be the TRO, but other ways in which to help them find safety without having to enter homelessness. Again, you got to be safe. I mean, I don't want to pretend that like staying home is a good idea all the time, right? Please no. We're talking about when it's safe and okay. Any other questions? Okay. Okay, we'll go on to the next one. But I'll just tell you, like secretly, and maybe you could already tell, I like talking about the components of the homeless service system because we don't often get to, so they make me happy. All right, homeless definition. Homeless definition is such a fun thing. It shouldn't be this hard, is what I would tell you. In 2011, actually 2009. In 2009, there was a federal law that was passed that said people shouldn't be homeless and they should be rehoused within 30 days. That's the earmark of what the federal law says, is that all people that are experiencing homelessness should be housed within 30 days. Awesome. And then not a lot of funding or a plan or anything for that. And so HUD had to make some decisions about how we were going to try and do that. And when HUD did that, the very first thing they did was released a very detailed definition of homelessness. So that was in 2011. And the definition of homelessness is 4 parts. We often think about homelessness for category 1 and category 4. Those are the most common. So category 1 is what you would probably, somebody that's not working in homeless services would think of. Somebody's sleeping outside, somebody is sleeping in their car, somebody's sleeping in a shelter. That's category 1 homeless. Somebody staying in a motel paid for by an organization, that's also category 1. Category 4 is folks that are fleeing or attempting to flee violence. They make up category 4. And most of our programming, by requirement of HUD, is geared for and designed for folks that are in category 1 and category 4. Category 2 is a little bit complicated because what it says is, I'm not homeless yet, but I'm going to be called homeless. So I'm experiencing homelessness, but I'm not quite homeless yet. And what it says is you're going to be in less than 14 days. I'm going to lose my housing in less than 14 days. I'm going to be kicked out of my friend's house in less than 14 days. I am spending all of my money on this hotel room and I can't continue to pay for it. I'm going to lose it in the next 14 days. That is category 2 homeless. And then category 3 says a youth or a family under the age of, a family or a youth under the age of 25 that doesn't meet category 1, 2, or 4, and has bounced around a bunch of times, doesn't have a lease, has other barriers, they can be counted as homeless too if they meet another federal definition of homelessness. So it sounds good, right? Like sounds like we're gonna be covered. We got all the things. The challenge is category 3 homeless requires HUD permission to use that category for the purpose of enrolling humans into federal programs, federal housing programs. And no COC in the country has permission to use it. So it's there. We can't actually use it as a way to enroll humans into the program. So our programs are really designed for category 1 and category 4. Category 2 is important, and it's there, and it tends to bleed a little bit into our prevention kind of programming that we talked about earlier. But really, if we have people in shelter, and we have people on the street, and we have people fleeing violence, that's where HUD wants us to use the majority of or all of our federal housing funds. Now, there's an entire other training series I can do on the homeless definition and all the nuances. But what I want you to walk away knowing is that the HUD homeless definition is complicated and that there are many categories of homelessness. Category 1 and category 4 are the ones we predominantly have to use. Now, there are other entities that have other homeless definitions. In the handout, you have the definition for the school districts. You have the definition for runaway and homeless youth programs. They are different. I call them squishier. They are less complicated. The reason they're less complicated, or one of the reasons that they're less complicated, is that they're designed to do something different than the HUD homeless definition. The HUD homeless definition is designed to prioritize humans that need to be housed. The school definition is designed to identify students that need more services and to ensure that they go to school and they graduate. The school definition was never designed to house human beings. The runaway homeless youth definition was never designed to house human beings. It's squishy because we don't want youth who have been kicked out of their home or pushed out of their home or fled their home to not be able to be served. So we make it squishy so that they can address all of that. That's why it's designed that way. Oftentimes, you can get into some disagreements around, but they're homeless for my definition. I understand that, but they're not for the HUD homeless definition. And that's frustrating. I understand that. But it's important to remember when certain entities use the school numbers as a way to show that your community has a significant problem with homelessness, what they're really saying is that you have a significant challenge with folks that are struggling to meet their basic needs. Because the majority of the youth that they're talking about aren't actually Category 1 homeless. I'm not saying it's not important, I'm just saying it tells you something different. And it's not like in the media you get to talk about all the nuances, right? It's just a big giant number. What I would also say is that it's important for you to know how the data gets collected, and this is certainly not going to go into all the weeds about that, but for those of you that use the Homeless Management Information System in the room, the database that we have to use, you know that there are start dates and end dates, right? Homelessness doesn't continue forever. Ideally, there's an end to the program. There's an end to the time in which they are homeless. In school definition data, if somebody is homeless on day 1 of school and they're housed by day 12, they are considered homeless for the entire school year. There's no end date during the school year. There's no stop button. So again, different. My last, there's going to be 2 soapbox moments throughout this presentation. I probably should have told you that. We're about to come up to one of them. The last one will be around advocacy. But this one is the last page of it's handout number 3 in your packet. It should be towards the end if the data one is separate. So it looks like this. At the top it says unhoused versus homeless. There are unintended consequences for the words we choose to use. And somewhere along the way, somebody decided that calling folks unhoused was a nicer word, it was a safer word, it was an easier word than people experiencing homelessness. I mean, there's less letters, that's true. But the challenge there is that the word unhoused doesn't actually mean what you think it means sometimes. So people experiencing homelessness means all of those categories I just talked about, all the different ways that people are in crisis. But when I say unhoused, all you're talking about is the humans that are sleeping outside or in a place not meant for human habitation and shelters. And you are ignoring any of the folks that are potentially in motel vouchers, fleeing violence, or precariously housed and meeting the Category 2 definition. We're minimizing the folks that we need to serve when we use the phrase unhoused. So on this sheet, I walk through, here's what you mean when you say unhoused or unsheltered or sheltered or homeless. And all I ask is that you make sure you're using the right word for the right thing. It's like nails on a chalkboard to me when I hear unhoused, because really you're calling a person unhoused as opposed to identifying the experience that they're having. And those are 2 very different things. A person might be experiencing unsheltered homelessness or experiencing homelessness, but that is a lot different than saying they are unhoused people. And we somehow are okay with person first language, except we use unhoused, and I don't get it. But that's my soapbox, so I appreciate entertaining that. That's all. Any questions? Any questions? So Jessica mentioned, so the data part is a separate handout. All kinds of charts and graphs and numbers. Some of the things in the handout are not necessarily on the slides, and some of the stuff in the slides is not in the handout. So we're gonna weave between the two. Please ask me questions, things that don't make sense. I tried to remove as many acronyms or define them as I possibly could. Like anything else, there is a bunch of acronyms in our world. They don't always make sense. So please let me know. Any questions that you have, like you were talking, you were thinking, you were walking, you were chatting, any questions that came up that we didn't cover or that you want to circle back to before we go any further? Okay, this is not your only opportunity. If you think of something, please don't hesitate. Okay, and my staff table apparently moved, so they're way back there. If you want to ask somebody other than me, they're back there. It's okay. So the slide up in front, what it is, it shows a lot of boxes. We talk about data a lot in homeless services. It's actually kind of interesting that that's what we do, but we do have a variety of ways that we can look at data to tell us something about the system that we have, the people that we're serving, and some of the outside influence that occurs and impacts our ability to help people that are experiencing homelessness. Sometimes, in a quick kind of response, we will fall back on the point-in-time data. We'll fall back on coordinated entry data. Those are kind of the two go-to responses around homeless service data, because we control that information, right? That comes out of our database, we have it, it's accessible, and we've honestly, for the point in time, we've been doing it for 12 years, pretty consistently in the same or similar manner. So we have a lot of data around it. But it's not the only way that we can measure information. So up on the screen, we have the 8 that we're going to talk about. First, annual numbers. So how many people are being served in the HMIS system, so the Homeless Management Information System, that database. How many people are being served in that database reports out to us in a calendar year for your community? Migration data. Migration data talks about how many people are entering the Rockwall Local Homeless Coalition providers from someplace else. And when they leave your programs, do they leave for someplace else? That is often a concern among folks, is that the people that we're seeing aren't from here. We hear that a lot. So the migration reports were designed to kind of challenge some of that belief. Point in time and coordinated entry, we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Race and ethnicity, we have some information as it relates to your, so the dynamic between how many people are you serving that identify in certain races or ethnicities versus your census data and the percentage of people that are in your community that identify with those certain races or ethnicities. System performance. System performance, it is what it says. It is a way to determine whether or not the programs are performing a certain way within the homeless service system. So when you were asking me, do you have enough of certain things, we have a couple of ways to look at if the things we have are working, if they are getting better, or are they more challenged by whatever the system is. So we could be talking about the average length of time homeless. That means how long people are stuck in shelter. And they're stuck in shelter for a variety of reasons, right? One of which is there's no place for them to go. And so if we continue to have struggles with landlords or affordable housing, we're going to see the average length of time increase because we don't want, and shelters don't want, to release people back into homelessness. First-time homeless, that's another data point under system performance. First-time homeless tells us the percentage of people that are entering your system that have not been homeless before versus the people that have been homeless multiple times over 2 years. That's cyclical, right? Like they keep coming back versus they're new. So that's system performance, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. Then we're going to talk about ALICE data. How many people are familiar with what ALICE data is? We just have a few? Okay, cool. So ALICE data is a way of looking at information a little bit differently. Most people, I think, know when we say the poverty level, right? That's a federal artificial kind of line in the sand where they say anybody that makes less than this is under the federal poverty level, and anybody that doesn't isn't, and should be fine, right? Okay. So the ALICE data says not so much. It says that there is a group of human beings that still can't afford their basic needs, even if they're above the poverty line. It's this like magical middle. And so we're going to talk about that and how that looks in Rock and in Walworth. The cool thing about the ALICE data is it's all online. It's accessible to anyone, and you can drill down to the town, the village. I mean, you can go really far down the rabbit hole, not speaking from personal experience at all, that you can go real far into that data and look at all kinds of stuff. And then the last box we're going to talk about it's a report called Out of Reach. And it's from the National Low Income Housing Coalition, and it says, like spoiler alert, right, that housing is expensive, and people don't make enough to afford 1 bedrooms or 2 bedrooms or fair market rents within a community. But it goes further to say, how much can they not afford? Like, how bad is it? Why is it out of reach? So that's like my preview of the data section. So we'll start off with annual served. Annual number of people served. So the pretty charts on the screen, on the left-hand side, looking back for 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. You can see that there was a bit of a jump, right, in 2024. Now this is the fun part about data, is that I don't necessarily know why that happened. But I suspect that there are providers in the room that might know why that happened or can speak to why that happened, which is also why it's important to have coalition-level conversations about your data so that everybody understands that this is what has happened. Because if you look at 2023 versus 2024, now granted the bottom number is not 0, so I just look at the scale. I'm not suggesting that it's like a 0 to 1,800 or anything, but you did go from 1,727 humans in 23 to 1,848 humans in 24. It's a jump. And this is people that were served through emergency shelter, transitional housing, or street outreach. So not the housing programs, just that front door. Yeah. No, rock and wall. So your rock wall combo. Yep. Oh, Ryan, you're up.
I don't have an answer, but I know at our agency, I work with New Beginnings, which we're a DVSA agency without a shelter. I think because so many of the ARPA funds left us in 2023, I think that perhaps contributes to the higher numbers in 2024. There were so many different grants and funds that were using ARPA to assist people, and a lot of those ended in 2023. So that it could be part of it.
Nope, that makes a lot of sense. And that's exactly the kind of conversation that I'm talking about, right? Like I, from the outside, can just see, well, that's a big jump. And then we need to talk to the people that are actually doing the services and the work that would know this grant ended, so we're gonna see an uptick in this, and we're gonna see an uptick over here. If that, let's assume that that's the sole reason. I'm not pretending it's the sole reason, but let's pretend it is. Then you have another conversation that you can have, which is, look what happened when we lost this resource. Look what it was preventing from happening over the course of 3 years. And without it, why are we surprised, right, that it suddenly jumped up? This is how many people were damaged or harmed during the shutdown and the COVID and all the things, the increase in prices, the impact. So if that's true, and we all kind of agree around that that's the reason, then that gives you a whole nother level of conversation to have with decision makers. I'm going to say, again, my second soapbox is going to be around advocacy, but the importance of informing people that make decisions about the needs of the community. Look what we were stopping from happening, and now look where we are. And this is your front door, right? Like I said, when we looked at those front door programs, this is your shelter, your outreach, and your transitional. Like this is that first step, and you're seeing this level. Guess what? You do not have this giant leap of housing programs available to meet this need. That hasn't changed. In fact, during COVID, when we saw all this money coming for all these different things, you know the one place that didn't see a single extra dollar is the supportive housing HUD-funded programs, Rapid Rehousing and PSH. Those two did not get any extra dollars in that whole thing that happened. But we saw much more need. So thank you for pointing that out. Oh, Brian, behind you. Oh, and in front of you, all over.
Just to add to that conversation, I do believe it was the ARPA funds that created this uptick in numbers. But in addition, that funding was not allowed to fund case management. So you are giving people housing without case management and wondering why it's not working.
Gotcha.
So another thing besides all of the money going away, Kelly just brought this to my attention. We had a landlord who lost a lot of properties in early 2024, and ECHO provided lodging to a lot of them that the city helped fund. So that is a reason why.
That would make sense too.
A couple of clarifications for the city of Beloit. We had a lot of case management funded with ARPA, and I think that led to a lot more diverse programs. But I also wonder if we have this backwards for the 2023-2024 jump. And I'm not sure that we've seen this in Beloit yet because our ARPA funds are still being expended. This is not up until next year, end of next year. But I wonder with the ARPA funds, are we not accessing the HUD programs as much because they're the ARPA funded, which we're not necessarily reporting to anyone, let alone HUD. So we saw that smaller green bar there of people accessing this in 2023 because we had those ARPA funded programs that were not necessarily using coordinated entry as much.
All good questions. I wanna splice out some stuff. So, number one, this box doesn't have anything to do with coordinated entry yet. Coordinated entry comes in a little bit. This is purely the number of humans that entered shelter, transitional, or were touched by street outreach, like an engagement with street outreach. So if the ARPA funds were designed to prevent people from losing their housing, then they're not entering shelter. If the ARPA funds were designed to provide motel vouchers and didn't use HMIS to document that, they wouldn't be in this box. So it kind of depends on what those funds were doing in order to prevent this uptick, because this is only about shelter, outreach, and transitional. Go ahead.
I didn't know that.
Nope, it's totally fine. Totally fine. That's why we're talking.
Yeah, thank you. It's not that I know that. I have a different theory, though. With all that ARPA money going into shelters, in Beloit, we've spent, over $3 million just in emergency shelter and transitional living and building those facilities. So seeing that number rise in the next couple of years, I think speaks, again, the opposite of kind of what we were originally saying of, look what happens when they take these programs away. But I think it's more of we had these really great programs, and I wish they were longer, and I wish they had more money. But we are able to build these systems that allow us to serve more in the future.
And I hope that's true, right? Because my fear is if we fast forward 2 years and I show you the bar for 2026, and it isn't tall like this, where did those people go? And if they didn't go into the housing programs on another chart, that means they went outside. And if they went outside, they're going to show up in a different place, and that isn't such a good thing, right? I mean, it's not good for them, and it's also, not going to be reflective here. So that's the concern I would have, too, is that your ARPA money did a good thing. It gave more opportunity for people to be inside and to have some kind of safety, but now what? And I don't know the answer to that. but I certainly think that that tells a little bit of the story. So thank you. Other comments about this part? Okay, if you, on the first page of the handout and the breakout, it does talk about if you are a person that likes all of the details. It also gives you information about, how many people were over the age of 18, what is the percentage of those over the age of 18 that had a disability, what is your largest age group? I always think that that's an interesting point. Again, we're talking only about shelter, outreach, and transitional. For the most part, I would say you have a fairly young homeless population. The majority is a young homeless population. 35 to 44 seems to be your largest group, if not the second largest group, and your next largest is the 25 to 35 or 34. I point that out to you because not every coalition is living in that space. In fact, the coalition we were just at yesterday is their number one is the 45 to 54. 45 to 54, that one step higher, older population. And that's something to pay attention to. We're going to talk about it here in the next slide, but the aging population of homelessness brings with it some other challenges. Right now, your majority tends to be that younger group. And then I have the percentages for race, gender, and some of the special populations, which looks at chronic homelessness, veterans, those fleeing domestic violence. And remember, it's fleeing domestic violence as reported in the HMIS system, not fleeing domestic violence as reported in their system. Okay, so that's a difference. So this is going to be a significant lower number than if I were to go to the domestic violence providers and ask for their annual number. So this is one of the drawbacks of our system, is that we can't combine those two numbers very well, except for in one place, which we're going to talk about, which is why I like it. And just so you know, it's the point in time. So if you hate the point in time, I'm going to tell you why maybe you should like it a little bit. Youth, and then it has youth, which are ages 18 to 24. So that is the annualized number. Now we're going to talk about aging. The aging population of homelessness. Something that we're paying attention to in most of the coalitions, like the one we were in yesterday had 2. You have 95. That is more. And it is a number to pay attention to. 95 people last year in 2024 were 65 years or older and interacted with your system. Of those people, the majority are male, the majority are white, the majority are not veterans, the majority are not chronically homeless, and the majority have income. But they are 65 and older and interacting with your homeless crisis response system. 40% of those ended up in a supportive housing environment, whether it's transitional or permanent housing. So rapid rehousing, PSH, or other permanent housing. But that means, to say it the other way, 60% of folks that were 60% of the folks that were 65 and older only touched your system through crisis services, shelter, outreach. And it's concerning because 65 and older can bring with it, I'm not saying it always does, but brings with it some potential physical health related challenges and some other kinds of challenges that shelters aren't always equipped to handle. And I don't know if that's true here. I don't know if that's a predominant concern here, but I do know in the northwestern side of Wisconsin, we hear a lot from that particular shelter about folks being dumped off at the shelter they should be in a nursing home or some other skilled facility, and instead they're ending up at the homeless shelter, which is, again, not designed to take folks in that level of care, that need for that level of care. So it's a number to pay attention to. It's something to think about and talk about. It's something to make sure that you have some services available or a plan for what happens if somebody is 65 and older with income that is still in crisis. What's the plan? I'll show you later, too, the trend for that ALICE number, right? The folks that can't meet their basic needs. The largest majority are 65 and older in your community. So That is something to pay attention to. A little bit more about your emergency shelter demographics. So this is taking all of those emergency shelters that were on that chart, all of those that report in HMIS. So it does not include your domestic violence providers, okay? This is not them. This is everybody else. So, Community Action, Echo, Edgerton, Family Promise, and House of Mercy. Those shelters combine all of their information together, and we get 758 people that were served in 2024, of which 546 were in households with children, 212 were in households without children. There were 7 vets. Only 39% had a disability, for a total of 31,997 shelter nights. The average shelter night here in Rockwall is 41.83 days. So that's the average length of time that somebody is in shelter. And then it's broken down here by the number of clients, the number of shelter nights, and the average length of stay. Motel vouchers obviously serve a very specific purpose. They're generally short-term. So it doesn't surprise me that there's less shelter nights, again, because it's not long-term. However, when I say not long-term, and then you look at the average length of time, which is 24 days in a motel, that's a significant amount of time. You have a very robust motel voucher program that doesn't exist in many other coalitions. Questions about this one? For shelters in the room, anything on here look weird to you or seem surprising? Seem pretty legit? Okay. Now, let me go back for one sec. 758 people served in shelter. And we're gonna see in a little while, that is not the total number of people that needed your help, though. And I think the shelters would agree. 758 is not the number of people that need help. That's just the number of people that were able to get a bed. Okay, migration. So this is the discussion around whether or not the humans entering your system are from here. Okay, in general, and in the handout, I do 2024 and 2023. 90% of the people interacting with your system are from here. They are from the Rockwall area, of which, when they finish the program, about 89% stay in the Rockwall area. Not saying necessarily the same unit or the same apartment, but I'm saying they stay in the 2-county area. The other colors on the screen, so can you see it okay? Yeah, you can. Like the teal color, that 8%, that 8% is from other COCs. That means Dane, which is your largest, and then Milwaukee and Racine. You do have some movement, although 8%, that come from those COCs. And your proximity to Dane, it kind of makes sense. You're just not that far away. And then 7% go back to one of those COCs. And a very tiny percentage, 2%, come from other, which could be Superior, it could be Wausau, it could be Green Bay. But I identify nearby, so down at the bottom it says nearby. Later we'll talk about that too. I went on the map and kind of just looked at the coalitions that kind of surround where you are. The Jefferson Coalition, Kenosha, Southwest, and Waukesha are all real close to you. It matters because people sometimes move. Moving to a nearby community isn't an unheard of thing. So I wanted to see how much movement just from those areas close to you. If you look at the pie chart on the left, none. Actually none in 2024 came from those coalitions. 90% from Rockwall, 8% from other COCs, and 2 from someplace else, not one of those 4, which I thought was interesting. If you look at, turn the page, if you look at 2023, you actually had a little bit more movement. So 90% came from Rockwall in 2023, 86% came from Rockwall. 4.5% came from Madison, and about a little more than 1% came from Milwaukee. Questions about migration? Anyone surprised? Okay, cool. Oftentimes I get people that are surprised by that. Yes. Whoop.
Share your question with the world, please.
What does the data look like since we're so close to Illinois, Beloit being right on the border? What does that look like, for your charts?
Nope, that's a good question. So a couple of years ago, and Jessica, maybe you can tell me if you're still on the HMIS advisory board, right? No, where are you? There you are. Was it 2 years ago? We added Northern Illinois to the HMIS system that the balance of state, Dane, Milwaukee, and Racine all jointly govern. So we allowed them to come in and be part of our HMIS sandbox, so to speak. So because of that, we have access to their information in a way that we wouldn't have before. Most of the time, HMIS is cut off at the border. So Minnesota may use the same system as us. They don't. But if they did, we can't share in that way. You actually are in a different situation where we actually can see some information from Northern Illinois. So if you look on the migration on that handout at the bottom of page 1, you can see that in 2024, 1.4% came from the Northern Illinois, Winnebago, Boone COC. It's not a huge influx, but you can see and note it here that there was a little bit. Any other questions? That's a good question.
Anyone who uses HMIS might notice that now when you're searching people, you'll see 2 profiles for them, and one of them have an Illinois code with it. So message your HMIS administrator and have them merge.
It's true. Does that make sense to everyone? It's just that, it's not all of Illinois, by the way, it's just that COC, that right below, which is really close to you. Any other questions? Okay. Then we will go on. Point in time. Okay. How many people in the room have ever done the point in time? Lots of people. Okay, cool. I highly recommend it just at least once. Your choice, January or July. I mean, they're very different, but pick one. It's a very interesting experience. And it's something that is very difficult to explain unless you've actually done it. Going out at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning and seeing your city from a different perspective, to me, is a very interesting thing to do. I've done the point in time in Eau Claire many times, Chippewa County. I even went up to Superior, very different experience. So I highly recommend it as if nothing else, as an outreach opportunity to better see what other people see when they're doing outreach. But the point in time, so this particular chart up here goes back to 2018. In your packet, it goes back to 2014. That's about as far as I'm willing to go. Things get a little sketchier prior to 2014 in the way that we collected data. But I feel pretty confident, 2014 and to the present. The point in time, the magic of the point in time, okay? So the 4th Wednesday in January and the 4th Wednesday in July, we ask humans, providers, volunteers to go outside on the same night, and we ask them to go talk to people that are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. In cars, sleeping in storage units, walking, around Walmart. In our area, they would sleep in caves on the river. Things like that. We're asking you to go outside and do that in that overnight hour. And then we allow you for the week after to continue to talk to humans that you're interacting with that are coming into your shelter, going to food pantries, signing up for Section 8, whatever. Did you have a safe place to sleep last Wednesday? And if they say no, then you ask them a few more questions. And even though we didn't see them the night of the point in time, we can count them as part of the point in time process. So why do we do that? Like, what's the point of all of that? Well, number one, we use it at the balance of state level. We use it as a sign or a way to show that we are doing outreach. Not every community has outreach funds or an outreach team or a hot team or whatever you call it. As you go north, it gets much more rural and they don't have outreach in the same way. So this is an opportunity that we can say everyone in the balance of state, all the 21 coalitions are doing the same thing on the same night twice a year, trying to cover as much of the geographic space that we take up as possible. That's one thing. The second thing it does is it gets at the fundamental problem of data collection when we have agencies that are not allowed to use our HMIS system. So the domestic violence providers, by very definition, cannot use our HMIS system. It's not necessarily that they don't want to, but they can't, legally cannot use our same system. So the point in time grabs HMIS data, it grabs non-HMIS data, including our domestic violence friends, and unsheltered data, the folks that are experiencing unsheltered homelessness, and it puts them all together into one number. So twice a year, we have that number that we can report. And it's the only data set, and I want to underscore that, it is the only data set that does that. So for me, that is why I like the point in time. It's also an opportunity for me to talk about why it's so important, because it gives us something that we can refer back to and look at trend. So if you look, 2018, 2014, I mean, I don't know how many people were not doing, and this is, you don't actually have to raise your hands, but like how many people were even doing homeless services in 2014 or 2018? And yet I have data that I can tell you that we've been doing this process that long. So we can see trend information. So for Rockwall, you can see the purple at the bottom is your unsheltered count. So that's the going outside and talking to humans. Your green is transitional housing. It's, you know, it had a slant down, it has a slant up, it's pretty stable in the middle. And then you look at the blue, which is your emergency shelter, and you can see from 2021 to 2022, there's this uptick. And I'm going to argue that that uptick coincides with what you were talking about, which is the increase in funding available for shelters, for motel vouchers. There was state money, et cetera. And we were able to provide more shelter for a period of time. That is what I see from my 500-foot view. But this is your trend information. If I look just at your unsheltered stuff, so unsheltered stuff, the blue is January, the red is July. And you can see a giant gap in 2020, okay? That's real. We did not, because of COVID, we did not do a structured summer count that year. We put a pause on it. It's the only time we've ever done that. So I don't have data for that, but we have it for the rest of the time. Something weird happened in 2022. As you can see on the graph, both July and January took a big jump downward, right? Almost like as a pattern. They both went down, and then they both went up in 2023. I don't necessarily, again, have all the answers. Based on the conversation, I have some sense of an idea. Ryan, Jessica wants to give us more of a sense of an idea.
I can let you know that ECHO had tons of COVID motel vouchers, and we were doing like 10,000 nights, like 21 and 22 and 23, and then that money went away. So that would help to explain this giant decrease of people sleeping outside in 2022. So if you play that narrative forward, it says, with the right amount of money and the right amount of access to motels, you won't have unsheltered humans. Without that, look where your July number is going. It is headed in a direction that I am sure most people are not very comfortable with. So right now, as of the 2025 count, so the one that we just did in July, you're sitting at about 35 humans that were sleeping outside. By far the most you've ever had. During the winter counts, the most you've ever recorded was, well, back in 2015, you had 83, which seems absolutely insane. But in the more recent years, the largest number
was 15 in 2023. So I don't have the answers to how to fix the problem, but what I can tell you is that with the right amount of money and the right resources, you won't have people sleeping outside. So if you have communities that are really upset about the number of people that are sleeping outside, you have data that says if the right intervention and the right funding is available, we can fix the problem. Without it, we're on an upward tick. At least in July, you're in an upward tick that's going to get worse. The handout has it broken down by the actual numbers, so this is pretty lines, but the handout actually has the numbers of people that stayed in emergency shelter, that stayed in transitional housing, or were unsheltered on the night of the count. In July, I did something else where I also added the percentage of your unsheltered count as it relates to the balance of state. So what percentage of the folks that were unsheltered were here? So in the July count, your unsheltered of 35 represents about 4.5% of all of the unsheltered in the balance of state. There is a growing trend across the entire balance of state of more humans being outside. So you are unfortunately fitting into that upward trend. Questions about the point in time?
You may have been touching on it just now. In comparison to like our neighboring counties, are the numbers that we're reflecting of 35-ish, is that less than or similar to neighboring counties?
No, that's a good question. So when we talk about neighboring counties, if I'm talking about like Jefferson or Waukesha or Southwest or Kenosha, your number is higher. If you're talking about, I will tell you the largest numbers: La Crosse, Wausau, Lakeshore, which includes Sheboygan, and Manitowoc, Brown, Appleton, Eau Claire, and then you. I think those are the top ones. So urban, some of the ones with an urban city tends to, but that's not 100% true for all the count, just the unsheltered part, because one of the largest totals for the point in time is West Central. West Central is, the biggest town is 12,000 people. So it's 7 counties, but it's very rural. They have a lot of domestic violence shelters and a lot of regular shelters, but they don't have as much identified unsheltered, if that helps describe. Yes.
And this may be more of a question for Jessica. Is our 2025 January count, is that because the warming shelters were open? Is that why? Okay.
Yeah, so the county took over doing the emergency warming shelters, and so we were able to access data, and it was open that night, so yes.
Again, with the right money and the right resources, you won't have unsheltered humans in January. I mean, that's the argument I would use if I lived in Rockwall and I wanted to make an argument for more funding to address the issue of increasing unsheltered, is like, this is a perfect data point example. If that, then this is what we can do. Without it, look at July. All right. Coordinated entry is a thing that started in 2012-ish, in having a conversation about the requirement that HUD was putting out that we had to do this. So I want to be clear, it's absolutely a mandate from the federal government that we change the way that we did enrollment into our programs. Our HUD-funded programs could no longer just take first come, first serve, or have their own entry process and decide who they were going to take and enroll into their programs. That needed to end, and they wanted a more prioritized process to ensure that the folks that were getting that very limited resource were the ones that were in most need. That is what they told us. So in 2020, 2012, and to 2014, we had some marching orders to create a coordinated entry system in a 69-county balance of state that has never done anything like that before. For For those of you in the room that were doing homeless services in 2012 and 2014, this was not an easy lift. There was a lot of angst and a lot of conversation and a lot of talking about how in the world this was going to work. What do you mean that you're going to tell me who I can and can't take into my own program? A lot of conversation went into this. It was not perfect when it rolled out in 2014. It is still not perfect today, but we are in a far better place than we were 10 years ago. And I have 3 staff that work for me that are dedicated to making it even better. When Ryan was hired originally, his job was the coordinated entry specialist. And he was supposed to make it work. And he did. He got it going and got it started and rolled out trainings and stood in rooms like this and talked about how it could be used. And if you spend 5 minutes with him, if you are a hater of coordinated entry, I dare you to spend 5 minutes with Ryan, because he will change your mind. And I'm not kidding. That's a crazy dare, but I'm not kidding. He talks about it, and I get excited about it. And I was one of those skeptics in 2012 and 2013, was like, I just don't understand how this is going to work. This seems nightmarish. And here we are. We have lists, we have prioritization policies, we have a process. Again, I don't think it's perfect, but I certainly think more people are being identified for, especially PSH, that potentially would have never, ever made it through the front door in many programs. And I can speak a little bit personally about that. Before I worked for the Balance of State, and before I worked for, I did HMIS for a brief minute. Before I did that, I worked in a homeless agency on the west side of the state, Chippewa area. And we had 2 permanent supportive housing programs at my agency. I did not make decisions about who went into that program. Our director did, and our housing director did. And I'll tell you, looking back, it makes me sad to know that that's how, like, the way they made decisions about it. And they were doing it out of, whatever sense of morality they had, but it wasn't first come, first serve. It was more like who was sad enough and who was repentant enough and who thought was gonna be successful. It wasn't necessarily the people that needed it the most. So I'm happy that we have a system that's designed to do that, but I know that not everybody loves it. I recognize that. But again, 5 minutes with Ryan, and he's going to set you on a different path of what it could be and how we could get there. Sorry, Ryan. I know, just a little bit. That's how much I have faith in his vision for coordinated entry. The doors on the top are the logo that we use and the design to reference a door into the system. It is the access point into coordinated entry. So if an agency has that, that is the visual cue that they should be able to do the assessment and get somebody referred to the prioritization list for housing supports. Okay, so that's a bunch of information there. In the handout, I have a whole lot more information about what coordinated entry is, when it started, how it works. But for pretty charts and graphs, I have things like this. So the other thing about coordinated entry that's interesting is that unlike our regular HMIS database, where you can run, if I want to know how many people were in your shelter on this date, I can run a report and it'll tell me that. I mean, I can't, but somebody can. If we wanted to know over the course of 2023 how many people, interacted with this street outreach program, the system can tell us that. Coordinated entry doesn't operate quite like that. It's a much more live, living system. I can't go back into it and ask for how many people were on the list 6 weeks ago. It doesn't work that way because there's movement. So what we started doing, and I kind of did it accidentally in 2020 and 2021, and now I don't do it accidentally. Now it's on purpose. But for the February quarterly meeting, I was having staff run the coordinated entry list for every coalition, and I started saving those. And then I realized if we did this every year, I would actually be able to show you trend information. That's the only way we could do it. So I only have it back to 2020. But I can show you in February of each of those years, this is how many people you had on your coordinated entry list for the Rockwall Coalition. You definitely have more households without children. You definitely had this weird thing between 2020 and 2021 where they were like overlapping, decreasing. It was a very strange thing when I was looking at it. But then the spike happened. So that's the trend information for who was on your list. The one on the right is just totaled, so you can see it as a collective. In the handout, you can see the actual numbers and the percentages. So back in February of 2020, you had more households with children on the list than you did households without. Not a lot. It was like 50.5 to 49.5%. Now today, if I go to the handout, in February of 2025, your split is about 64-36. So about 64% of the people on coordinated entry are households without children, and 35% or 36% are those with children. That's an important dynamic to pay attention to. If you have a ton of programs that are designed for families, but only 36% of those people identified as homeless and in need of support are families, you are missing resources for that other population. Does that make sense? Like you're gearing it to the wrong group, or maybe you have too much of it for one group and not enough for the other. But that's a way to check yourself that your system, that you have the right interventions for the right number of people. I'm not saying you have enough. Nobody has enough. But that trend is an important thing to pay attention to. And that's one of my scary stories. There was a community that didn't pay attention to that switch. They wrote a grant, they got it. It was rapid rehousing for families. They started off fine, and then guess what? The trend went the other direction, and the primary number of people that needed help were households without children, and they didn't have the resource that was designed for them, so they were not able to fill their units, they were underutilized for a long time, they couldn't spend their money, et cetera, and they lost the grant because they didn't pivot fast enough. They didn't change that program process in order to address the changing need within the community. All right. More pretty charts and graphs. This is the list as of October 17th. So as of October 17th, you had 221 folks in households that weren't with children, and 133 household family units. Those were the people that were on your coordinated entry list as of October 17th. The pie charts on the top right side are the race and ethnicity identification breakdown. Households without children, the predominant race is white, the second is Black or African American. For households with kids, it's just the head of household, right? So this demographic does not show what the race or ethnicity of the children or anyone else in the household would be, so just that head of household. But you do still continue to have the majority being identified as white, but the other percentage is higher for Black or African American. And then down at the bottom is age. So the largest group, which is interesting because remember I told you in shelter, your largest percentage of humans is that 25 to 34 or 35 to 44, that is your largest range for access to shelter. But in coordinated entry, your largest, the biggest group of people is the 45 to 54 group. And so I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm saying something to pay attention to. If people in the 45 to 54 have more access to coordinated entry and not as much access to shelter, that's something to pay attention to because that is a significantly higher number. Families are still in that 25 to 34-year-old range. And then in the handout, I have the actual numbers. I can tell you that I can tell you that 24% of the people on your list on October 17th had been on that list for more than 200 days. I can tell you that that's for households without children. With children, 22% of the people on that list for families have been on that list for more than 200 days. And I can also show you the actual percentages for age and for race and ethnicity. That's all in the actual charts in the handout. The next thing that we can do with coordinated entry is we can make some, we have that. Hold on, I'll come back to that. For this one, let's do this one first. With coordinated entry, what I can do is I can say, of all the people that are on the list, 354 humans that are on the list, what do you need in your community in order to solve the homelessness or have housing solutions for all 354 of them? What would need to happen? And this chart kind of tells you that. It says, looking at chronic homelessness, whether they're diagnosed with a disability, how long they've been on the list, what kind of intervention would be most likely to be the most effective in addressing the homeless situation. So in this case, 94, or approximately 27% of the total solutions needed. You would need 94 more units and case management for PSH. 94 more on top of what you have. Remember, PSH is that intensive case management, leasing units, access and working relationship with folks in mental health and AODA in order to help achieve stability or help clients achieve stability. 94 more, that's a lot. The next one is rapid rehousing with intensive case management. What does that mean? Rapid rehousing is the model. We talked about that earlier. Intensive case management means weekly home visits, engaged and involved, helping folks actively attempting to solve or address their barriers. It's not light touch case management. Sometimes it requires more skill, more funding, more supportive services, additional things like transportation assistance, childcare assistance, moving costs, life skills costs. I mean, it costs more. I would say in your community you have two that would fit under what I would call the rapid rehousing with intensive case management. You have Family Services DV Rapid Rehousing Grant, and you have CAI's Rapid Rehousing Grant. Those two have more funding available in case management than the other kinds of rapid rehousing that exist through the state funds. But you would need 182 more units of that and the case management to go with it in order to address the needs that you have in this community. And then rapid rehousing, like the regular, lighter touch, maybe once a month. Somebody lost a job, they need a new job, they need a little bit more support in that category. They haven't been homeless very long, they don't have a diagnosed disability. You need 78 more units of just that in order to address the needs of the people that were on the list on the 17th of October. And if you had all that, you would address the 354 people. And unfortunately, I think that the next day or the next day, you would see some more humans that need assistance. So I don't want it to be like, well, if we did this, then the world would be all fixed and we would all not have jobs. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is 354 represent the humans that were on the list on the 17th. And remember at the very, very beginning, I talked about the system, right? The design of a truly functional ending homelessness system is that we make it rare, brief, and non-reoccurring so that we can intervene quickly. Don't let people sit on lists for 200 more days, that kind of a thing. People like this chart, I've been told, because it gives them actual numbers that you can use to have conversations about what you need. You can have this at any time based on the coordinated entry list. It's just a pull out from that list. Okay, I'm gonna go back. So coordinated entry, one of the parts about it, besides the human impact, is where do these referrals come from? Where are your access points for the system? That's what this slide is designed for. So the HMIS referrals in the Rock-Walworth area come from a whole bunch of agencies. You have a variety of access points from the agencies in the two communities. I would argue that you could use more, but you have certainly a lot. So you have CAI, Echo, Edgerton, Family Promise, House of Mercy, Project 1649, Rock County Human Services, and Walworth County Housing Authority. That means if somebody presents at that agency and are experiencing homelessness, they are supposed to be offered the opportunity to go and have a referral done into coordinated entry. That's what being a door into the system means. So those are the folks that have generated referrals into the system. From the non-HMIS side of things, we have two different setups. We invested funding to create a non-HMIS coordinated entry system, and we did that to meet the needs of our domestic violence survivor providers. Like, we did that so that they could also refer in and not need to bounce clients from their agency over to the housing, or the HMIS agencies, the non-DV agencies. So we have a separate list that they can refer with unique IDs, protects the confidentiality because the humans aren't on that list, just I don't know, like a made-up number, an ID number that the agency itself has the record of. So in your community, the three agencies that I saw referrals, Edgerton, Family Services, and the Y. Now you may be like, Edgerton isn't a DV agency. That's okay. It's not only DV that can refer. If a client doesn't, if somebody is experiencing homelessness and they show up and they're like, I don't want to go into the HMIS system, I'm not so sure about that. You can put them into the non-HMIS system. It's not exclusive to only DV. It's anybody that doesn't want to go into the HMIS system for the purposes of coordinated entry. Same thing as before, nearby coalitions. I identified, again, there's movement that occurs. So nearby coalitions, Jefferson, Kenosha, Southwest, and Waukesha. So the pretty colors. If we stay on the left-hand side, that's your HMIS lists. Households without children, households with children. By far, the great majority of all the referrals in your coordinated entry system come from rock wall providers. That's the blue. The orange represents those nearby coalitions. That means somebody referred from Jefferson Coalition to your list. Somebody referred from the Kenosha Coalition to your list. That's the orange. And you do have a little chunk that is from outside of the nearby coalitions and outside of Rockwall, but definitely less than 25%, closer to probably 20 or 15% of your list. The non-HMIS list tells a little bit different story. The non-HMIS list, at least as it relates to households without children, you have an active domestic violence community in this state that knows how to refer, and they're trying to find solutions for their folks, and there is limited solutions for households without kids. So that green, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, it's definitely coming from providers in, for the most part, in Green Bay, seeking services for their survivors of domestic violence. Not the same with households with kids. That is predominantly coming from Family Services in the Y. Orange is similar, close, and then blue, that teal is the outside. Questions? Okay, we'll keep talking about coordinated entry for another minute. If you turn the handout, it's something that I started adding a little bit newer. Starting to talk about length of time homeless. So we have folks that have been on the list for a really long time. In your coalition, you have a couple of folks that have been on and referred from Rockwall providers for 600-700 days. They've been on the list. And that's true for families or households without kids. So there's a chart at the top just to show you, this is, where did the referring coalition, how long have they been on the list, and what's the update? And I'm not saying there's anything, there is something wrong, right? Like, we don't have enough services and access to housing resources to get these folks housed. But it isn't unusual to have somebody that might have a significant number of barriers struggle to find housing. What's important is as part of your, as part of your case conferencing, as a part of case conferencing should be a group of humans coming together to help problem solve solutions for everybody on the list. 354 solutions are needed Some of them are going to be needed in supportive housing, right? We're going to need a higher level intervention. Some are going to need problem solving. Some are going to need help fixing the problem for themselves, going back to live with grandma or going to live with a roommate, something. We have 354. So case conferencing is designed and supposed to be about doing that. And in that conversation, in that discussion, knowing why the person that's been referred for 781 days is still on your list, it would make sense that you're having that conversation about the level of barrier and what is the resolution. Is staying in the Rockwall community the best thing? Does this person have resources somewhere else? What do they need in order to be housed? And is there options available to them to help with that? I don't know the answer to that, but that's the point of case conferencing, is so that you all have the answer to that. Does that make sense? I have a fly that is joining me up here. Okay. The second set of boxes has to do with the amount of time somebody has had homeless episode. So that's not necessarily the amount of time they're on the list. They could be on the list 2 days and have been homeless for 6 months. So this is just showing you have a little bit more variety when it comes to this. When I sorted, you have some referrals from outside coalitions that have a longer period of homelessness than your own referrals, at least as it relates to households without kids. With kids, it's yours. 34, 35, 36 months of homelessness. Again, they could have been on the list for 2 weeks, but that's how long they've been experiencing that homelessness. That's what was reported. The last part that I'll say about it is the non-HMIS list. I do have on page 7 of the data handout, that box at the top represents the number of people that are on the non-HMIS list, a total of 113 people, of which about 19% have been on the list for more than 200 days in households without children, and about 40% of families have been on there for more than 200 days. But you have 113 total. That's separate. I didn't add it in. So this box that's on the screen, this number is not included. We're working on that. My hope is that someday we'll be able to include them in a better way. Any other questions about coordinated entry? Did I scare you about coordinated entry? I didn't mean to.
I work for an agency that we provide transportation to seniors to help them maintain their housing and their stability. If we have an older adult who is seemingly at risk or is homeless, and we wanted to ensure that they were connected to coordinated entry, what would be the best referral? Is it to CAI or community action, or like if maybe they're also going to ECHO and receiving support from us, is ECHO making that soft handoff for them? What would you suggest?
It's a good question. So in this community, CAI is the coordinated entry lead. That does not mean they should be doing all of the referrals, but they are a stopgap, and you can speak up, certainly, if you want. You're already in ECHO, refer them to ECHO. They can coordinate entry as well. So, and they'll be able to see. So that's the thing. If you're doing referrals into coordinated entry, you can see whether or not there's a referral already in there. They're not going to do another one. It doesn't help anything if we keep making multiple referrals. I will also throw out, however, and this is where Ryan would jump in and tell me, you could also be a referring entity yourself if you wanted, or your organization can. There's a series of trainings. You can go into non-HMIS. If you want to get real crazy, you can go in, not crazy. If you want to get real excited, you can go into HMIS. But you actually could go and do it yourself.
You could be an access point. You could be a partial access point. There's a bunch of different things we could do. So you can reach out to me. You could reach out to your SSO position. We could have that conversation and figure that out.
I want to get to, okay. I will talk about this real quickly, but then I'm going to get to what can you do about all the words that we just said. This section is the system performance part. There's lots of pretty charts on the slides and the actual raw information going back many years is in the packet. I picked coalitions at the bottom that are similar in size or structure to yours. So Rock Wall, for example, on this slide is the dark blue. Brown is Green Bay, Cooley, which is the La Crosse area, and then Waukesha is in gray. So I picked ones that either had similar, like your shelter structure, or had similar funding for programs, or had similar number of people experiencing homelessness to try and give you some comparison. Because I know some folks are interested in like, where do we stack up, or where are we close? Your average length of time probably influenced greatly by your motel voucher programs, keeps your average length of time pretty low. If you can see here, it's low, and in this case, low is a good thing. Some of the more neighboring communities have a much higher average length of time. Reoccurrence, this is whether or not people exit your shelter and leave for someplace permanent and then show back up homeless in the system 2 years later. Your dark blue, you can see, you kind of ebb and flow, and then at the very end, you're almost equal with Cooley, kind of right in the middle of everybody else. This is an area of ongoing improvement. It's really hard to exit to permanent housing, but if they do, the hope is you've provided enough tools and support that they won't show back up homeless 2 years later. This kind of scattered looking one is for those that exit rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing. If they leave those two larger interventions, we want to make sure that they don't show back up homeless 2 years later. So this is showing you how many have. You had a peak in 22-23 that would have made me quite concerned. And then the result in 23-24 is to go back down. So something happened in 22-23, but it was resolved or addressed in 23-24. This is how the outside world, specifically HUD, looks at whether or not we're performing in the way that we're supposed to be. So it requires the balance of state to take this information for the entire balance of state and report. I asked our HMIS team to pull reports by coalition so I can share back with you locally, but when it gets reported, it's all as one big giant chunk. This one is exits to permanent housing, so how many people are leaving rapid rehousing or leaving shelter and going someplace permanent. This one also I know is challenging when there aren't good, safe, stable options for folks, and finding housing is hard. But this is where you guys end up. You're right in the mix of the other neighboring communities. Obviously, it's always an area seeking improvement, but you're kind of comparable to the other communities of the same or similar structure. This one is those that are leaving PSH or staying in PSH. You are also real tightly compared to the others, so good or bad, you are up there. It's always an area in need of improvement because these are folks that need the most help, and so the argument is we want to see them stay in PSH or exit to another permanent housing destination. So we'd like that number to be as tight and tiny as possible. But that's where you're at. I'm going a little bit quickly, but here's the ALICE data that I talked about. So we're going to segue. ALICE data, remember that's that threshold where I said they can't meet their basic needs. They're not unable, the estimate that they're unable to pay for basic necessities like housing, childcare, food, transportation, healthcare, technology like a basic cell phone plan, and pay their taxes. So in Rock County, about 11%, which is on average with the state, are under the poverty level. 26% though are under that ALICE level. So add those together and we say that 37% of the people that live in Rock County can't meet their basic needs. Walworth County is a little bit different. Poverty level is still the same, about 11%. Their under ALICE threshold is 22, so we would say that 33% of the people that live in Walworth County can't meet their basic needs. And down at the bottom, it shows you for a family of 4, the federal poverty line is $30,000, which is crazy. And it does not take into account like kids in childcare versus kids in school. The Alice threshold does. So in Rock County, if you have 2 school-age children, it says you're going to struggle to meet your basic needs if you make less than $67,356 versus the federal poverty line, which is $30,000. Go one step further, and I can show you this is families with children over time, the different types of family units. So single females are at top, the middle are married, and the bottom are single males. And over time in Rock and Wall, what is the number of households that meet that under Alice threshold? And here's where I was saying that 65 plus are your largest group in that Alice threshold. It's the gray, and you can see that going back to 2010, it has just slowly crept upward. Your lowest is your under 25 category. And that's true in almost all coalitions that I've seen so far. Yours is a bit higher, but it's all trending in the same direction, which is that folks under 65 or over 65 struggle to meet basic needs. Okay, before I go to that, I want to show you one other thing in the packet only, and that is I went further with the Rock Wall stuff. On page 11, you can see Rock County. I pull out the 3 census places that have the largest percentage of those living under Alice. So this is the communities that have the most people struggling: the city of Beloit, the village of Footville, and the town of Rock. The 3 that have the smallest percentage of folks that struggle to meet their basic needs: Harmony, the town; Avon, the town; and Union, the town. And then I do the same thing for Walworth. But giving you an idea of where that's located. And P.S., you can see lots of charts and maps, and this is the in the rabbit hole kind of stuff that you can do. Okay, system improvement. Oh, no, I can't do system improvement yet. National low-income housing. I can't leave without telling you this. So on page 11 or 13, it breaks down for Rock and Wall how many households you have. Of those, how many are renters? So in Rock, and it's actually equal for both of your counties, about 29% of the households in your communities are renters. Of those renters, the average or the median income is $1,215 a month. In order to afford a 1-bedroom, so the fair market rent of a 2-bedroom is $1,153. A 1-bedroom is $879, but the average income is $1,215. If you get Social Security, you can afford $315 a month, but the 1-bedroom is $879. And that's if you can find one under fair market rent. If you work minimum wage, you make $7.25 an hour. In order to afford that 1-bedroom, you're going to need 93 hours of work a week. To get a 2-bedroom, that's 122 hours a week. Those are numbers that are really startling when we start thinking about real life, right? Like when we talk about that and what that really means. We go on to the charts below, and it shows you the median hourly wage for the most common work that people do that struggle with meeting their basic needs. No wonder they can't afford where they live. All right, that's the data part. The next couple of slides talk about what do we do with all the information that you've heard. Some of the questions to ask and some of the next steps is a reflection on your system and your program. I mean, I gave you all kinds of stuff that you could talk about, questions to ask. These are some of the kind of wrap-up, big picture ones. Do you have the right projects in your community? Do you have the right amount of supportive housing programs for people with mental health and AODA-related issues? Do you have enough units? Your coordinated entry system tells you need 100 more. Of the ones you have, do they have enough funding to be able to do all the things that you need to do for those that are enrolled? Does your community have enough rapid rehousing and qualified case management? Do you have enough funding to support the case managers that we are asking to do Herculean level tasks and walking alongside people with all kinds of barriers? Have we supported them enough with the amount of training that they need and resources they need to do that job? Do you have the right funding? Government funding, while maybe not in the current moment, but in general, is a pretty consistent and a good resource for some of this. Comes with strings and rules. If you can include non-government funding or more flexible funding, it can fill the gaps and help do things that federal funding can't. Something as absolutely ridiculous as for the rapid rehousing programs. This is just an example. So CAI's rapid rehousing and family services rapid rehousing, they can't pay for beds for people. So people that are experiencing homelessness don't have a bed, and this program can't pay for a bed. That's silly, but it's true. It's in statute, like they can't do it. But the PSH project that CAI has can. So flexible funding can help identify those gaps and pay for things like that seem really basic and very important if you want people to feel stable in their housing. And then do you have the right amount? Does the community have enough permanent housing solutions? Do you have enough landlords that are willing to work with you? Do you have enough housing units that are willing to work with you? Do you have enough services for the specific subpopulation? So your veterans, your youth, your folks fleeing domestic violence. And do you have a structured setup so that when the person that gets Social Security, who can afford $377 a month, doesn't need intensive case management anymore, but clearly is going to need a rent subsidy? Do you have a plan to move them from the supportive housing program over to something else so they can continue that subsidy, but open the slot for somebody that's chronically homeless or sleeping outside? That's called a move-on plan. There are some examples across the state of housing authorities that have dedicated vouchers for people that finish permanent supportive housing or finish rapid rehousing and don't need that case management anymore. They get a voucher. So they automatically get that Section 8 voucher, and that opens a slot for somebody else. If you don't have that program here, that is something that you should consider, because it would help move and create some flow within the system. It could be of help. I did a presentation for a foundation several years ago, and they told me they wanted one slide, and they wanted me to tell them the 3 things that needed to happen to end homelessness. And I said, well, you get 2 slides, and I have 5 things. Sorry. So these are the 3 to start with. You need a strong coalition. You need what exactly we started the presentation talking about, which is diverse perspective and insight and bringing people together around the idea that we want to end homelessness. We want to create that structure and that system. We don't want to just manage and continue going at the same pace that we're going. We want to increase community level understanding about the problem and the resources and the needs and the solutions. Strong coalition. You need a strong crisis response system. So that means taking those 8 components, pulling them apart and saying, do we have what we need? And if what do we have and what we have, is it working? Is it successful? Is it doing what we intended it to do? Do you have the right amount of it? Third, the commitment to ending homelessness. This is the robust case management, problem solving, having team level approaches, working to reduce the inflow. So that's diversion, right? We talked about diversion. The idea that we don't want people to end up homeless. So if we can stop that from happening, that's a good thing. And also at the same time, create more outflow, getting people out of emergency shelter and into permanent housing. Sounds good, right? If we do those 3 things, then we're going to end homelessness. We have a good coalition, a system, and a commitment. And unfortunately, what I would tell you is that it's not good enough, because without housing and landlords, we have a fantastic system with no place for people to sleep. So we need affordable housing. We need landlords that are willing to take a risk. Maybe it means nonprofits becoming their own landlords. That is one of the suggestions that came out of COVID, is that people, regular landlords, have a lot of selectivity and they can choose whether or not, right, that they don't want to rent to people with challenging backgrounds. So maybe nonprofits need to become their own landlords so that they can rent to their own clients and take those risks that they know how to take. But either way, you need the housing and you need the landlords in order to make this work. My last soapbox, which clearly will be fast because I think Jessica's getting twitchy, is the is the idea that we can't wait for somebody else to come in and help us. That time is over. If we're not willing to step up and ask for what we want and tell people what we need, nobody's coming in to rescue us and nobody is coming to save the homeless system or funding for homeless services. There is plenty of opportunities to speak up and out at the federal level. The National Alliance to End Homelessness has done a great job creating a ton of avenues. So it's in the handout, it's on the slides. You can go to any one of those links and read all about. You can do a quick little thing, enter your address or like your home address, and it'll automatically send the information to your elected officials. From the state level, the way that we're structured is a little bit wonky in my opinion, but I'm from Minnesota, so what do I know? But there was a budget. There was homeless service funding part of the budget. It got all taken away, so we got no extra funding for anything related to homelessness in this current budget process. So the only way that we're going to get anything or ask for anything or stop anything bad from happening is working with these two committees. The Assembly has one and the Senate has one, so I identified here who the chair and vice chair are, and there's links on the slide you can see. I also went a step further and said, here for Rockwall is who your people are. Assembly, you have a ton, and you have a ton of in high positions. Obviously, you have the Assembly Speaker, you have the Majority Leader, and you have the Minority Caucus Vice Chair. And in the Senate, you have the Minority Caucus Vice Chair as well. You have an interesting mix of both Democrats and Republicans that doesn't always happen in communities. They tend to be all the Ds or all the Rs. In yours, you have a mix. And what I would say is this. People get worried about lobbying. People get worried they're going to somehow go to like IRS jail because they lobbied for a thing. And what I would say to you is this. Every single person in this room clearly cares about homelessness in this community, or you wouldn't have spent the morning here. Or somebody made you come that cares about homelessness in this community. Whichever it is your, I'm going to say, duty and obligation to tell people what you know and how you know it. In other words, talking to these elected officials about what would happen if this bill or this thing gets passed and the impact it would have on the people you're serving, who else is going to tell that narrative and tell that story? It's us. That's it. It's us that have to do that work. And there is nothing law-breaking about that. It is as a citizen, as a community member, as a person in these districts, you can speak up to these folks and tell them. Invite them for tours, educate them about the stories, talk to them about what this would mean. If you do this, this is what this would mean. If you don't do this, this is what it would mean. And you won't go to IRS jail because you are educating and advocating around a topic you're familiar with information. And if you need any help at all, don't know what to say, how to say it, or whatever. Ryan also leads the team of advocacy for our staff. And you can reach out to me, you can reach out to him, and we can help with words, with ideas, with suggestions. But I can't stress enough that becoming a buzz in these folks' ears is an important thing, even if you don't think they're listening. That is my contact information. This has been a ton of information. I really appreciate you having me here. If you have more questions, I'm going to be here. Ryan's here. My other team folks are over there in the corner. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.